Boom, boom. Hello, hello. Let's see. Starting the live now. Waiting for it to hit the live button. There we are. We are live. Hello, everybody. This is one of those unpopular videos, but it has to be done. Um. So, if you read the title, uh, this war is unconstitutional. And not just this one. And then I know people are like, well, presidents before, and you'll see even the Mike or whatever, Johnson or whatever, uh, I think it's Senate. Um, you'll see him say when he talks about it, he'll say, "Oh, it's been like the War Powers Act," and then not even that, just how the president uses his power. He's like, he says for decades, and most people don't catch that. Like they're thinking like decades. They're not even, but like he's like, yeah, that decades aren't that long, right? So like there's a period where people started doing things that they weren't supposed to, and it just became the norm. And that's normally how things get changed, where people just ignore parts of the Constitution or they try and uh, change it. Um, and he says he's a constitutional lawyer, which is probably true. That's why he's able to um, use precedents and you know try and make it sound good, um, like they're not doing anything wrong when they are. And if like lawyers do both, like right, because they defend the guilty and they defend the innocent. Uh, but yeah, so they're willing to lie, but um, or say anything. I shouldn't just say lie, but willing to say anything um, to make their side seem valid, right? But so let's just go ahead and we'll jump into the whole thing. The whole thing. Oops. Or no, not that one. Minimize. It's this one. Hold on briefly. There we go. There we go. So let's see this part that pertains to uh,
to be determined. Of course, it depends upon how long the operation goes and what the need is. But our appropriators certainly asked that question. But I think there'll be some time before we can put a final number on it.
he's laughing at the American people. He's laughing at.
So, you know my background. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I'm a jealous guardian of Article 1 in the legislative branch. My understanding of the law, and has always been, and this is the tradition and the way the law has been used and observed over many decades, the president was acting well within his authority. What I just told you is the scope of what happened here and the situational awareness that they had at the time to make this decision. It was not, it's not a declaration of war. It's not something that the president was required, because it's defensive in nature and in design and in necessity, to come to Congress and get a vote first. And if they had briefed a larger group than the Gang of Eight, you know, there's a real threat that very sensitive intelligence that we had, you know, might have been leaked or something. So this is why.
So you see, like, it's funny that last part. Like, well, you know, the intelligence. If we actually did go to Congress, like, the information might have been leaked. So therefore, it trumps. We're allowed to override the Constitution and the people's ability to decide whether we go to war. Because this is the thing, that these people are cowards and they don't want to vote on the war with Iran. And we say, oh, we're not going to war, but I'm going to show you here in a moment, like how the founders defined war and declaration of war and conflict. So like the founders, this what we're doing now is considered an act of war and declaration of war. So we are essentially uh, at war with Iran. We are committing acts of war, and Donald Trump is a criminal, um, in the sense of like just like Obama. I know people say, "Oh, these other people did it too." Yeah, all the other presidents that did the same thing, they are criminals in the sense of like when we break the law, uh, like we're considered criminals, correct? Right? And so when they act like it's funny because the Constitution is supposed to be the law of the land. It's the law that limits government, right? And like when they break it, um, they act like it's no big deal, but like they're criminals and they're doing criminal acts. Um, they're not much better than like the drug dealer that they love to talk about, or the cartels. Like they're just as criminal. And I mean, like you see, they blocked, like, so they wouldn't become public. They wouldn't have to have access to see the lawsuits against Congress and stuff, and people and members in Congress. They kept that sealed, right? Like they're criminals, and they have been for a long time. Um, all right, let's see this next part. Um, let's go. Ba-ba. Continue.
The commander-in-chief of our armed forces has the latitude that any commander-in-chief, any president always has, because they have a set of information that is sensitive, timely, and urgent, and they have to be able to act upon it. They did that. Now, as you know, under our system, there are timetables that are involved here, but I think the idea that we would move a War Powers Act vote right now, I mean, it will be forced to the floor, but the idea that we would take the ability of our commander-in-chief, the president, take his authority away right now to finish this job is a frightening prospect to me. It's dangerous, and I am certainly hopeful, and I believe we do have the votes to put it down. That's going to be a good thing for the country and our security and stability.
But you said Congress can authorize this war, Mr. Speaker. Defensive operation.
All right, so now we'll go to whoops, this is way. All right, we're gonna go here.
Ones that we get very often, like what qualifies it as war? Can they, drop a few bombs on this person because they put their ships in the wrong place? Or can you support a group over here or over there because, you've got human rights violations, whatever it may be? And can they just do very small, limited attacks or invasions or air raids or from ships or whatever it may be? Can they have some level of violence and it not be a war so the executive branch can just do that on its own? Well, a very typical dictionary definition of war at the time of the founding was this: the exercise of violence under sovereign command against such as oppose. That was from Barlow's Complete English Dictionary. I think it was 1772-73. Again, the exercise of violence under sovereign command against such as oppose. And I covered these types of definitions in that episode I mentioned early on, the power to declare war and introduction. There are some other dictionary definitions in there as well, all very similar. So if you have the commander-in-chief of a military in the United States exercising violence under the sovereign command of the United States, the people of the United States represented in that situation, and if the place where they dropped a single bomb or a bullet is opposing that, then that is an act of war. That act of war, if it is not a repelling a sudden attack, as Jerry and Madison told us, had to get a declaration of war from Congress, period. So that's one that we get often is, well, this doesn't count as war, so it doesn't need a declaration. Wrong. Any single act of violence against what is opposed in another country is an act of war and requires a declaration. Now, a lot of people will also say, well, what about Jefferson? Thomas Jefferson, well, he did it. He had this war with the Barbary pirates, and he had no declaration. He just went over there, and it was a limited thing. He kind of
We'll continue that in a moment because that is one of the other like common things that people bring up whenever I bring up that like this like we don't they should have had a vote on it when we went to war with Iran. Like that is what the Constitution says, and that's what we must do. And um, if you let any branch take powers, like because Congress has people talk about the War Resolutions Act, and you'll see I'll play a video on this, but it's like they don't have the Congress can't give away its power to declare war. It can't delegate that to anyone, just like they can't delegate their legislative powers to bureaucrats. Like a lot of both of those are unconstitutional. A lot of what has been happening is quite unconstitutional, and just like the president cannot make war without a vote in Congress. Like the only thing he can do is if we get attacked, he can defend us, right? But then once they're repelled, he can't go further. He can't chase after them. And this, like the founders were very clear on this. Even Jefferson, Washington, like there's examples of when they were president and and America was under attack, right? And how they acted, even when war was declared against us, like they had to wait for approval from Congress. So, um, and that's how it's supposed to be. Like it, not only does it give the people, it's supposed to be a slow system so that the people have a chance to decide whether we want to send our sons and daughters to war. And then also it makes those in Congress have to put their name to it and stand behind their decision so that like if it was unpopular decision, like we can vote those people out. So um, it's very important. And then again, like I said, people will say, well, Barack Obama did. Like Barack Obama's a criminal too. Like you shouldn't have done it. Anyone who broke it is wrong. Like so, and I mean that just is what it is. But Thomas Jefferson, people like to bring up this objection, like, well, when the Barbary Pirates and stuff, Thomas Jefferson did, he went to war with them without Congress. Like, well, let's see.
Held back, but there was a war. Now, the only way that you can actually say that, the only way that you can actually make that claim rather than ask it as a question, hey, I heard this, but if you make that claim that Jefferson did that, you either have not studied any of the history and you're just picking up propaganda from somebody else and spreading it in support of the monster state, or you're a liar. There's no way around it. And it could be both, actually, because that view has absolutely nothing to do with what actually happened. Jefferson was even more restrained than I think he needed to be after the Pasha of Tripoli declared war on the United States, and he still said he could only go beyond the line of defense. And maybe this is one of those things where he's saying, without a declaration of war or a sudden attack, he could defend ships, but there wasn't a sudden attack on the United States territory as well. So then he needed to go back to Congress, and he did that repeatedly. Now, I covered that in a pretty long episode. It looks like over 2 years ago, Thomas Jefferson versus the Barbary Pirates. It's actually one of my favorite episodes because it covers that very important argument that so many people make. Well, you guys are, this 10th Amendment group, you're Jeffersonians, and Jefferson didn't require a declaration of war, and this is an absolute lie. So I encourage you to check that one out as well. Another question we get is, well, once it starts, how does it end? And here's James Madison again in his Helvidius letters. August 24th, 1793, in his paper number 1. And this is, I think, just some insight. I don't actually understand the process of ending as much as I should, but here's how Madison put it. Those who are conduct a war cannot, in the nature of things, be proper or safe judges whether a war ought to be commenced, continued, or concluded. So the commenced part is changing the status from peace to war. That's Congress. Continued, well, that's the funding of Congress. And concluded, that's, again, Congress maybe ratifying a peace treaty, for example, saying, yeah, we're good on this. Even if the executive branch maybe kind of initiates that, James Madison said it's never in the hands of the executive branch to make any of those decisions. And here's why. He continued. They are barred from the latter functions by a great principle in free government. analogous to that which separates the sword from the purse, or the power of executing from the power of enacting laws. So if they can carry out the war, this is a great principle in what would set up a free government, that is, not having that decision be in the hands of a single person. And the last one, just briefly, what
So, like, you see, like, this is completely unconstitutional, especially when you go back to the definition, because you always judge the Constitution by the language of the time and the understanding and the definitions of the time. You don't reinterpret it um, by like today's language. So like when the Mike Johnson says like for decades, he's not talking about from the founding. He's talking about since you could say, I mean, like Woodrow Wilson, Roosevelt, like each one, they kind of felt themselves a little too much, and they expanded. They worked to expand their power, and they used the Constitution of more as a suggestion than anything else. So we we see like, and it's not just them. I mean, you can keep going little by little, and then some. I mean, Woodrow Wilson definitely, but um, like when people talk about like Donald Trump's the greatest president since, like they don't know what they're talking about. He's not even he's not even really pro Second Amendment. He's not even really all that pro First Amendment because they passed those bills on the anti-Semitic speech. Um, yeah, I mean we'll see. I mean, and then even Florida though, Florida too. They have some bills that criminalize criticizing the Jews. So, but uh, like we shouldn't have went to war for this. If Israel, um, I mean, the ones who wanted it really is Israel, and uh, some of the things that you've been told that Iran's been striking, like its allies, or not allies, but people around it, like Saudi Arabia, like actually a lot of those stories, like a good amount of the stories actually weren't Iran. So, um, yeah, it's crazy. And then if you listen to some of the things that like, uh, we're not gonna. That's another video. But, uh, like Congress, they're cowards. They just are. Like, they pretend like, oh man, I wish we could control the president or whatever. But how do we rein in his like? It's easy. Like they're not his powers. He's breaking the Constitution. All you have to do is grow a spine. Um, and then when it comes to war, like you have to grow a spine too. You got to be willing, and that's what we want. We want you to have to put your name to it, right? So we know who's responsible for us being at war. Um, like especially like since the last example of how we pulled out of Afghanistan, um, and we pretty much rearmed our enemy and left them better equipment and gave them the. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And then we left our the people who helped us to die, and be murdered, um, and and we didn't really provide a way out for them to come here, which they should have. They earned it. If if we're gonna create the situation where they're gonna die, right? Like they helped us, um, when we were there, so they earned somewhat of American citizenship or something, like, or even if we help them get to another country where they're not in danger, like that's the least we could do for people who put their whole lives on the line for us. But that's what we do is we abandon our allies, like our real allies. Israel isn't really our allies. Israel looks at us like now I've seen enough of their leadership talking about us, and like basically what Israel is doing is pitting its two enemies against each other, us and the Arabs. So, the Christians and Islam, they're putting us together, and they're hoping that we destroy each other, and that's what they're doing because they don't have the balls to do it themselves. and it's funny. Like they can't. They should have done. If they wanted Iran gone, they should have done Iran. Um, but uh, but yeah, like instead, it's our sons and daughters getting shot down and stuff. Like there should have never been any American pilots shot down in Kuwait, or uh, like this whole thing should have been avoided because this isn't America first. Low. And actually, like I'm not the only one that feels it. Like a lot of people who voted for Trump, so like they were looking for the because he said he'd be like he'd bring peace and all this stuff, but he's really been a president of war. Um, with between Venezuela, like you can say it's a socialist dictator, but they did that to themselves through that process. They did that to themselves. It really was on them to get out of that situation. Um, and and like in Iran, like people are using that like, oh, you see Iran, they're free and all this, and I'm like, but we did that in the first place. Like we did do that. We're the one that destroyed the democratic state of Iran when it was because they had socialized their oil and stuff. Like they were becoming too independent, so we decided regime change, right? And then we seen how like that's how we got the Ayatollah and all that stuff. So um, again, it's our fault. Like we need to stop meddling in other countries and then wasting American lives because every life that was in Afghanistan that we lost was it was for nothing, for absolute nothing. And in fact, they died to better arm and strengthen uh, not Al Qaeda, but the Taliban, and they did. So like all that blood, all the American sons and daughters that died in Afghanistan, like you died for the enemy, so to better them, because that's the result at the end of it. America didn't get anything from that, right? And that's Barack Obama and Joe Biden. So like we need to stop policing the world. That's not our job, and we need to fix our own problems. So, and we do have problems, but the addressing the War Powers Act. So we'll just watch a quick thing on that now. Meow. Da, da, da.
Under the Constitution, the president has no authority to declare war, even if Congress tries to delegate that power to the executive branch. Anytime we point out that only Congress has the power to declare war, we hear from some people that the president doesn't really have to worry about that because of a law passed in the 1970s. They believe, like the people who passed the law, that the president has the constitutional authority to unilaterally declare and wage war as long as it's only for 60 days or less. They're wrong. The law they're talking about is the War Powers Resolution of 1973. In this act, the president was essentially handed the power to start military action anywhere in the world without getting a declaration of war from Congress as required by the Constitution. In fact, the law so disregards the power to declare war that it reduces it to a mere suggestion that the president consult with Congress when possible. The only significant limitation is that it requires the president to withdraw troops within 60 days, absent a declaration of war or specific congressional authorization to extend that time. On top of it, the law allows an additional 30-day period for the military to disengage if Congress fails to declare war. Under the War Powers Resolution, Congress took a power delegated to it in the Constitution and transferred it to the president. But Congress was never delegated the power to pass the buck, not for 60 days, or 1 day, or even 1 minute. They're simply not allowed to transfer their power to somebody else, not even the president. And Congress isn't authorized to change the Constitution by passing a resolution. There's a specific process for that. Since there isn't any provision in the Constitution allowing Congress to transfer its delegated powers to another branch, it can't simply give the president free rein to send troops off to war, even if that action is limited to 60 days. Under the Constitution, Congress is required to make that call and make it before the initiation of military action. In short, the War Powers Resolution doesn't give the president any power at all because the law itself is unconstitutional.
So I'm glad I found these videos because I was making the same argument before I even watched any of this stuff, just from reading the Constitution and then looking at some of the things the founding fathers said about it, and I came to the same conclusion because people they're bringing up. I would make the argument it's unconstitutional. It needs to get Congress has to vote on it. They're the only ones that can take us to war. And then people would bring up the War Powers Act. So then I went and read the War Powers Act, and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's unconstitutional. Like the act itself is unconstitutional because in the first place, the only people who can actually declare war or approve these kind of actions is Congress. Like it doesn't matter if there's a law or like and then people are like, oh, well, it's a federal law. Like it's an unconstitutional law, which the founders talked about this a lot. That just because Congress passes a law, if it violates the Constitution or its powers, it is to be null and void. Like it is not a law. Like an unconstitutional law is not law, right? And we see a lot of unconstitutional laws enforced by force, right? Um, like things that are not unconstitutional or that you do that are constitutional that the state has decided it's a threat to them and they don't want you to do it. So then they use force. They kick down your door and they arrest you, and then they say, oh, he's doing something illegal. But it like especially when it comes to like the ATF or something like that, like no. And then it turns out that most of the time it's the government trafficking guns. So under Obama with Fast and the Furious, and they armed the cartels. That's the kicker is that what they're doing they always blame us for, and then it ends up being them that were doing it all along. And the only thing is they want the monopoly on power, and they don't want to be held accountable for the evils and the law breaking that they do, as we see with Epstein. Like this should have been a no-brainer for Trump. Like it should have been prosecute these people, but he's not. And then and it doesn't make sense. And so, and the headlines were going against them. And then people point out that when people weren't dropping the Epstein thing, then all of a sudden we go to war. And now I think they're talking about Google searches, how there's a ton of Google searches about the Epstein thing, and now that we're at war, they've dropped. So it's changed some of the conversation. But I implore you, do not forget the Epstein files. Like you have to hold them accountable. They're trying to slip away, and they're laughing. Like you see Bill Clinton and them laughing, and don't forget that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are Donald Trump's friends, and they have been friends for a long time, just like Donald Trump was friends with Epstein. I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but he was friends with Epstein. And yet they say, oh, well, he told on, Epstein, he reported him. And I'm like, but there's a bunch of files that have not been released, right? That have to do with, that have Trump in them. And that's crazy because, if you're not, and I'm not saying he did anything, but the whole thing needs to be released so people can go through it. And now people have created AIs AI. So even if it's millions of documents, you can actually search all the documents by names or keywords, and you can bring that stuff up. But it's funny how they're trying to protect these elites and these evil people. It's because, and I say this because Trump, and I've said this since even when he was getting arrested and stuff. I'm like, what we're actually witnessing is how the elites battle each other, and it's a struggle for power from by the elites. Because Trump is an elite. He's been with them. Like if you look at all the pictures of all the people you know to be the elites, like he's in pictures with them and partying with them and a part of that group, and he's been that, like those families have been that way for a long time. So what you actually were witnessing is how the elites play the game, and uh, that's how they battle for power. This is all a game to them. Like your life is a game. Um, you're supposed to just shut up and go along with what they want to do. Um, but yeah, so a lot of conservatives, a lot of people feel betrayed by uh, his war actions, um, because that's why they voted for. Because when Biden was talking about possibly putting boots on the ground in um, Ukraine, or even the funding and sending the weapons and stuff, like we were like, no, we don't want that. We don't want another war. We don't want to send our sons and daughters to go fight a war for a corrupt nation. Like we got enough trouble with our own corrupt nation, right? And and then we pay the price too. Like our cost of goods, our cost of everything goes up because of those wars, and not necessarily because we get involved in those wars. Just like we see with the oil has went up, or the price of fuel and stuff is going up. And Trump said something uh, in an article. He said something along the lines of "it's a small price to pay" or something like that. Like it's funny that when we pay the price, it's a small price to pay, but when they have to pay the price, it's this big like tantrum. Like so, when we get spied on, it's not a big deal. Oh, national security. When they get spied on, right, in their in their private lives, that now all of a sudden like, oh, the government should not be able to, like, they're spying on you. We need to pass a bit. Like, see, like it's a double standard. And like what I find is when you point these things out, when it's if Trump's doing stuff like this, like the immediate reaction of like the older generation of Trump supporters is, oh, you're a Democrat. And then, or like if they when they talk about Massey, right, Thomas Massey, who is America First and he's actually abiding by the Constitution, they'll say he's un-American, and that's crazy. Like the truth is that those people calling a lot of, because he's actually pursuing the law of the land, and you're saying he's un-American, and that's like, that just goes to show how like brainwashed you are, because like that is the most American thing you can do, is hold the federal government within its limits, right? And reduce government power and take responsibility for yourselves. Like that is the most America First thing ever. So yeah, I just want to make a quick video. Hope you enjoyed it. Might lose some followers over this, but I don't really care because I don't know. I'm kind of over the whole robots and factionists and all that stuff. Like, it is what it is. Y'all are pretty gay. But hopefully, Rodney, I'm gonna try and possibly have Mike on here again, and then Ron should be coming back on too. Hopefully, when we get Rodney and Ron back on at the same time, it'll be a pretty good show. So, yep. Well, till my next video. My next video is probably going to be about, abortion, and I don't know if you've been following in Indiana. There's a judge that just ruled that, well, there was a group that petitioned, I think filed suit or whatever, and I think it was something Jews. So like, it's kind of funny that the Jews are petitioning to be able to kill babies as a religious right. It's kind of weird. But I mean, historically, they do have a history of child sacrifice. But that's for another video. But all right, shalom and peace.